And just a warning for you two, I do have pictures that are going to go on the screen, so if you want to sit where you can see, yeah. Yeah, I know. Like the preacher in front of church, right? With nobody around.
The first row is always.
That's right. That's right.
All right, well, maybe we can start. Thank you all for coming. You can join us, please. Thank you, Melissa, for your willingness to share your work. And let's begin with a prayer. Our Heavenly Father, in this Holy Week, we come to you. Help us to focus on Christ and His sacrifice and the death and the resurrection and for our redemption. Thank you for this Holy Week. Thank you for this opportunity for us to think and meditate in many different ways. We pray for churches who have Maundy Thursday tonight or Good Friday and of course Easter Sunday. You have done be with us. And today we are thankful for Melissa and her work as missionary for many, many years, and also for sharing with us of what she has done and the experience that she has had for all these years. Help us to interact well, help us to learn from Melissa, and also to support each other. In Jesus Christ we pray. Amen. All right, so Melissa, just take it from here.
Thank you. So I'm going to share today something of the side stuff that I did in Oman, not necessarily the ministry, but some of the things I did for fun, believe it or not. But I want to start with introducing you to my family. I don't think everyone's met my family yet, and so this was taken a few years ago when my son, who's on the left, Isaac, was in his second year at Calvin University and visiting us in Oman for winter break. Next to him is our daughter Alexis, who's in 11th grade. And then Sophia is our middle daughter, who is a freshman at Calvin University. My husband, of course, Jeff, there in the glasses, he graduated from Calvin Theological Seminary in 2003. So we were in Oman for 6 years, and we went there with Resonate Global Mission, which is the mission organization of the Christian Reformed Church of North America. And in Oman, we partnered with Al-Amana Center, which was started in the late 1800s by the Reformed Church of America. I want to make sure everyone knows where Oman is because I did not know before I went there. So Oman is in the middle of the map here in the Middle East. And you can see by this map, it's very brown because Oman is on the Arabian Peninsula in the Gulf region, surrounded by the neighbors of Dubai, who I'm sure you've heard of in the UAE, and Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Kuwait, Iran, Iraq. And these countries are known as dry desert places where Muslims live, and this is true. It's also known for conflict. When I tell people that I lived in Arabia, I'm often asked, did you feel safe? And I was not afraid at all during our time there. In fact, Oman is one of the safest countries to live in the world. But that's for another colloquium. So let's get to what I really like to talk about today, and that is the wadi. Does anyone know what a wadi is? Anyone have an idea? Yeah.
Yeah. What I understand is when it rains, it becomes a river, but when it's not, just dry.
Exactly. Thank you. Yep. It's a dry ravine between two mountain ridges where the water flows when it rains. So in the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, they use the word wadi. I haven't found in other versions, so if you do, let me know. And in 1 Kings 17, verse 4, after Elijah has predicted a few years' drought, the Lord tells him to hide in the Kerith ravine, and then he tells him You shall drink from the wadi, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. And I find this verse amazing because, one, the ravens are going to feed Elijah. I don't know if you guys are familiar with ravens or crows. They are not friendly, and they would definitely not share their food with people. But also, God's telling Elijah to go drink from a temporary river, which will most definitely go dry during a drought. So, what an amazing thing for God to say. Yeah, I'll go feed you with the ravens, and I'm going to have you drink from a dry riverbed. The capital city of Muscat, where we live, stretches about 60 kilometers or 37 miles long along the coast. It's about 3 miles wide. So on the one side is the Gulf of Oman or the Persian Gulf, and on the other side are the Hajar Mountains. And we lived, right here, I'm going to show you, we lived right in this neighborhood here. Yeah. So the mountains were kind of in our backyard. Now here's something to consider. Hajar in Arabic means stone, and the Hajar Mountains are rock and not much else. Hajar in Arabic also means the act of leaving one's home to settle elsewhere or to abandon or forsake. And in Oman, the tribes that live in the mountains pronounce the J as a G, Hagar. You guys know this name. Also in Hebrew, this name means flight or flee. So I've always loved to hike, but it was my husband, Jeff, who first suggested we explore these rugged, unmarked wadis near our home. And I am forever grateful to him, who encourages me time and again to push my comfort zone with my physical abilities. We also often took paddle boards out onto the open ocean, and he even convinced me to learn how to kiteboard. But I'm going to focus today on sharing my learnings from the wadi in 3 main areas: the water in the desert, being prepared, and finding renewal. So rain is not very common in Oman. We would get excited about clouds like people here get excited about rainbows. We went months without rain on a regular basis, and this is why when there are high winds in the area, we have dust storms. In Muscat City, it is required by law to keep your car spotless, so the police can ticket you if your car is too dusty. I'm really glad that doesn't happen here. My car is not very clean. Oops, I'm not ready yet. Here you go. I'm still there? Yeah, good. Water is a commodity that is carefully protected, and for centuries, the irrigation systems called falaj, as seen in the photo here, have been built to bring spring water to farms, villages, and towns in rural Oman. The National Museum of Muscat's Falaj exhibit shares the legend that King Solomon came to Oman to teach the people about the Falaj system and how to build one. This is a legend. Some people say, no, that's not correct, but this is what the government has decided to put in their display. So the desert does really seem empty of life, in the mountains too. The picture on the left there is what it usually looks like. But if we have rain, even for 10 minutes, dormant plants spring to life. And there must be little caches of water in the rocks and around in the rocks, because plants will bloom for months after like a good hour of rain. And moths and other bugs appear out of nowhere. It's incredible. Yeah, that was really fun. I actually said, Jeff, quick, walk in there and make all the moths come out. There are also signs of life in the mountains because there are fossils all over the place, even on Jebel Shams, which is the highest mountain range at 9,800 feet or 3,000 meters. Yeah, it's incredible, fascinating. My family's favorite hike is near the village of Sa'al, about a half-hour's drive from our home. We start down this path leading past a sheep and a goat herd, and then into the wadi. There are a few sketchy parts where we have to get across incredibly smooth rocks, and if you misstep, you'll slide down into that little hole there. And then we go into a cave, which opens up into a big, massive hole. A large, smooth hole in a rock. And I marveled at this cave system for years. How long did it take for random bouts of rain to smooth out this rock? And then someone told me about this book, The Secret Knowledge of Water by Craig Childs. He's an adventurer, a field instructor of natural history in the American Southwest. And when I read this book, I learned that these enormous rocks and caves were probably polished smooth and carved out fairly quickly because water is really powerful when moving at high speeds and in large amounts. And while living in Oman, my kids didn't have snow days. 7 months out of the year, it was over 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 45 degrees Celsius, so that doesn't happen. But they did get days off for flash floods. And those are really dangerous when you live in a city that's built on and surrounded by rock. After almost every major rain, we would hear of cars that were swept away and even people dying because they were caught up in the torrential flooding. And in this book, Charles shares terrifying stories of the power of water in flash floods. It left me in more awe and wonder as I traversed the wadis. So that leads me to the second point, being prepared. It's really important when exploring wadis in a desert. I co-led several women's hiking groups during our time in Oman, and we had 3 rules. If it might rain, we will cancel the hike, even though most of the time the clouds pass over us and we don't even get a drop. It's just not worth the danger that could happen from flash flooding. Second, you have to bring water. Becoming dehydrated is a real concern in the desert countries, and more so when you're sweating and hiking in the sun. And third, your shoes must have laces. I don't know if you've seen, there's a lot of tennis shoes that are actually just slip-on shoes. No, they need laces for a tight fit, and you should have a good tread so that you can walk around the boulders and the rocks. And if women would come to our hike without water or without good shoes, we told them they couldn't come. It was not worth the risk and the safety of the whole group. I always took a hat and sunglasses for sun protection. The sun is really pretty bright in that part of the world. I never hiked alone, as you often lose cell service in the wadis. And so it's good to have a partner in case one of us becomes injured. There are seldom trails in wadis. So especially after COVID, when a lot more people started exploring the natural wonders of the Hajar Mountains, I would go online and just see if there were any blog posts or social media blips about the area I was going so I could learn some information, do a little research. I learned to trust my body. On hiking days, I would drink before, during, and after a hike until I knew I was hydrated. And I would hike sometimes only 2 hours, and it would take me until 6 or 7 in the evening to know I'm good, I can stop drinking. When I started going slower during a hike, it was time to rest and eat some dates. So I brought some dates. If you haven't had one, you are welcome to have one or pass it along. Dates are a natural, good food for hikes. They've got a little bit of sugar and energy, and they're one of the few crops that grow in Oman. I became very adventurous in Oman. Prof. Vandenberg, in her last lecture, I don't know if any of you were there, she commented that women or people in their 50s cannot do the things that people in their 20s can, but I can tell you, I did a lot in my late 40s. With some friends, I hiked up the side of Jebel Shams. So this is the tallest mountain range in Oman. We hiked up the side of it, and we stayed in a shepherd's camp overnight on the steep ledge overlooking the valley. We hired local guides to show us the way, carry extra water, and cook for us, which was the bonus. I rappelled 60 meters, the equivalent of a 20-story building, down into the crack of a giant rock. I never need to do that again. So I really don't think I'm a thrill seeker, but I do like to explore. And I found out that I have a pretty high tolerance for sweating. I found joy in meeting other women who also loved exploring and teaching women from all over the world how to listen to their bodies and know their limits. And grow with them in wonder and awe of the creatures and plants that thrive in the desert, not to mention the amazing beauty of rocks. Who knew rocks were so beautiful? Finally, I want to share a little bit of the renewal that I found living in the desert of Oman. When we moved to Oman, I was honestly ready to move back to the United States. We had been in Bangladesh for over 15 years, and I missed my family and friends, the 4 seasons of Michigan, and the ease of life that I remembered from growing up here. I didn't want to go to Oman, but my husband did, and our mission organization wanted us to go there. And I had to admit that I was in love with the landscape and the calm, respectful Omani people after our very first visit. So I learned that when I say no, sometimes God does not take that for an answer. Our time in Oman was full of challenges with ministry, logistics for our family, and don't forget about COVID. Besides the joy of exploring with Jeff, our family, and my new friends, I soon realized that living in the desert country of Oman was opening my eyes to biblical stories and teachings in new ways. And I've shared a few of those already. Can you think of any stories that you know from the Bible that refers to deserts or droughts or maybe water? Do any come to mind?
I remember that Jesus told to build a house.
Yes, building the house on the rock. Yes, that's a really good one. Anyone else? The woman at the well and the water. What else reminds you of that story when you think of the desert?
I mean, it was during the heat of the day. And,
Right.
And that was, why it was so surprising that she was,
Yes.
probably because she was ostracized by the other women who would have gone earlier in the day. So
Right.
she had to go later. And,
Yeah, that's a good point, exactly. And to that point, when we would do our hikes, we would go as early in the morning as possible or an hour before sunset. Now in Oman, the sun rises and sets very quickly, so you don't want to get stuck in the wadi at sunset, but you want to not be there in the middle of the day because it is exhausting to be in that weather. Thank you. How about John the Baptist? Living in the wilderness and eating locusts and wild honey? I don't know if you've ever considered that John might actually have been living it up in the desert. Wild honey is amazing. Omanis guard their wild honey sources like people in this area guard where the morel mushrooms can be found. I don't know. And I learned from a pastor in Bangladesh that certain kinds of locusts are actually very good. He asked us years ago when we were first there, he said, which kind of locust do you think John the Baptist was eating? He could have been feasting on delicacies of locusts and wild honey and fresh spring water in the wadis. Or how about Job? In chapter 6, Job compares his friends to wadis. He says in verse 15, my companions are treacherous like a torrent bed, like swollen streams that pass away. And then in verse 17, in the time of heat, they disappear. When it is hot, they vanish from their place. This simile of Job makes more sense to me now that I know what a wadi flowing out of control with water can look like one day and then be completely dry the next. The Bible is full of stories about sheep, goats, and shepherds. And I learned to consider the many stories about sheep and goats in a new light from living in Oman. Did you know that sheep are actually pretty stupid? Yeah. In Oman, shepherds, who are most often women, mix in some goats with their herds of sheep because the goats are not stupid. Sheep would walk right in front of moving cars, and goats do not. Sheep wander and get lost, and goats do not. The goats help keep the sheep from straying. They help them find water. They help them find their way back to their pen. This makes me wonder how this understanding of sheep and goats could give us new insight to the story that Jesus tells in Matthew 25 of the Son of Man coming and separating the sheep from the goats. I always thought I was a sheep, but you know what that is? That's admitting that I'm stupid. It's a humbling comparison. It means that we need someone to care for us, because on our own we would get into trouble. I don't think it was a coincidence that while I was exploring the desolate valleys of Oman, I was invited to introduce materials supported by the Bible Society and developed by the Trauma Healing Institute. At the request of the director of Al Amana Center, I organized a pilot group based in Oman during the summer of 2020, so I had to do this online. However, people were eager to process the pain and suffering not only of the COVID pandemic, but other tragedies and traumas in their lives, and God gave much grace. At our first online group, more than 35 men and women came together to learn about the grief process, where God is in our suffering, and the true path to healing and hope in Jesus. Somehow, people were able to share about finding God in the hard desert places of life in Zoom rooms. As we trained more facilitators and with the help of mentors from other countries in the Gulf region, we reached people from as far away as South Africa, India, and Finland. At a time when life felt limited, God provided his abundance. My long, often quiet scrambles up and down the wadis in Oman gave me brain space to think. Wadis are usually absent of noise. They actually, once you get in them, you don't even hear the traffic of the city. There's no activity, there's not much color. They are an abundant space for acknowledging worries and then letting them go. And for me, letting go was also a deep surrender to God. I found companionship with other women as we explored together, finding our way around the boulders and the prickly bushes. And together we shared life as we paused to drink water and eat the dates. I grew in gratitude for the gift of water, and I grew in my patience for God's mysterious ways and generosity, which is not efficient by human standards. I'd like to finish by reading a poem by Morgan Harper Nichols in her book, All Along You Were Blooming. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's an American artist and poet, and she has one that reminds me of the Wadi. May love wash like water wild over me in the desert of my mind when I am tired, thirsty, seeking. That time of year when I am growing, when I am a year older, but not feeling stronger in my shoulders. May love remind me that growth is incremental. I have been aching for the rush of fresh spring water. It does not come, but I trust the water is not stagnant. Even the softest, lightest rain can break the ground beneath my feet and fill the very roots of me with the tenderness I need. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah.
Time for us to have a conversation. Questions.
And pass the dates if you need
And try the dates. They are sweet. I love it.
Did it remind you of Palestine or?
Well, it did.
Yeah?
We went to Wadi Kelt out
Okay.
there where Jericho's on one side and then there's this big wadi, mountains and stuff, and then on this side is Jerusalem. And we were at a time of year that I don't think was quite as dry, but you could definitely see where they said that when the water would flow down, there'd be it would just be lush and green instantly and stuff. But then we were in a little bit of a drier time than that, but you could see where the water would go because it's like just green, this stretch of little green stretch down below. So you could see that's where the water would flow. And that's often where like people would want to walk, except it's dangerous to walk down in there.
Because of the water, or
The water, and also like, when Jesus talks about like the Good Samaritan, that kind of story about, that's kind of a dangerous route.
Okay.
Yeah. But like this felt a lot more rocky than Israel.
Yeah. Yeah, Oman gets the rocks on the peninsula. Saudi Arabia is just sand, but Oman gets the beautiful rocks. Yeah. Thank you very much. You're welcome, Sam.
With the poem, I felt like your whole presentation, for me, felt like a long poem of beautiful imageries and stories. So I really appreciate that. And for me, whenever I was reading the Bible, I felt like, desert signifies death and, barrenness and emptiness. But it sounds like there is so much life there and joy there as well. So this is very eye-opening for me. I do have a question. As I was listening to your story, I'm a big fan of the metaphor of pilgrimage and life as a pilgrimage, as fellow friends and brothers and sisters, as fellow pilgrims, right? I could not help but kind of make that connection. Have you ever connected that, or is it something that you thought about? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I actually know a woman who came to Oman, more daring or maybe more dangerous than I am, who did a 3-day pilgrimage into a wadi by herself. Yeah. And I think probably some of you know better than me about the desert fathers and mothers that would go into deserts for long times, right? And of course in the Bible there's lots of talks about Jesus going to the desert for 40 days, and yeah. I would never do it by myself, I don't think. But no, I think there is something significant about going to a place that has nothing. That's what I found too for myself. It was really helpful to get the clutter out of life, and also realize how dependent I am on God's grace to be in these big, I would walk through some of these wadis and think, when did that rock fall? And what if a rock falls today of that size? Like, I never heard a rock fall, but yeah, it does humble you for sure. Yeah.
I was just sort of curious, do they build like wells there as well, and are there like natural springs?
Yeah. So there isn't much well digging per se, but there are natural springs. And so when a natural spring is found, and Omanis have been people have been in Oman for a long time. I mean, they had one of their major ports was really, really active during the time of Jesus. And they were there much before that. So these are old springs. And you saw the wadi that in that one picture. As soon as someone finds a spring, they build a wadi and make sure they can take the water where it needs to go, because water is precious. Now, on the side of the mountain that we climbed, there were several villages that were abandoned because the government had built a observatory on the top and had dug for water and actually had diverted the water from the natural sources. They didn't realize what they were doing. So then those villages were without water, and they had been there for a long time. But then the government provided a place for the people to move and the infrastructure to live, but still. So water is still precious. Yeah. It's a good question. Yeah.
Were the wadis protected in any way, kind of similar to like a national park in the United States?
I wish. They aren't. And we moved there in 2018, so we were hiking before COVID. We noticed a huge increase during COVID of more hikers and more litter. And it would be nice if Oman would start to preserve some of its beautiful places. But it's not there yet. Yeah. And there are some dangerous places to hike. Sometimes I'm surprised we go there. I mean, here in the U.S., you would definitely have a rope or at least, guardrail or something, but yeah, they don't have any of that there either. Yeah. We actually made it in our hiking group the last couple years. Another thing we would pack besides water and good shoes was a plastic bag for garbage. And so we would pick up trash. Yeah.
On the same area of question or issue, how does the government protect the people, the hikers, and what kind of help, just in case? 911, I mean,
There is, and I'm trying to remember which number it is. I think it's 411.
Okay.
There is an emergency number. Of course, if you're in the wadi, you can't use your phone.
Yeah, no connection.
So you have to wait. And we did have one hike where we were in a wadi and we had a group of 15 women, which I think was a little too many. And one woman actually only brought a tiny bottle of water, and we were in the wadi for 2 hours and she became dehydrated and we had to carry her out. And then fortunately, once we got to the cars, we were only 10 minutes from the village.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be scary. But we also would hear about people who got caught in a wadi during a flood or things like that. And the government would send helicopters in to go rescue. So there was a whole rescue operation. But the biggest thing the government would do is tell people not to go in the wadis, especially when the rains were around. Yeah. Yeah. If you have someone locally, someone from the villages near that area, they know exactly what's going on, and you can ask them, do those clouds look like rain? Or, there's all sorts of local knowledge that you can rely on. Yeah.
No, I'm reminded back when I went to Oman, and it was so great. We didn't go to Oman.
We took you to Wakan. Yes.
A different place.
Yeah.
It was so great, and yeah, I remember it was very rocky, but it was just beautiful, the landscape. It was so beautiful. And you didn't share it today, but how the buildings are low. Or, the government
Oh, that's true.
higher than
Yeah, in the picture of the city, you saw all the white buildings. So in Muscat City, you have to have a white building, and it can't be any taller than the mosque tower. So it keeps the city low. So there is one area where they're building up. I think the government's given permission to have a little bit of a downtown or something. We'll see how tall they get there. But it does keep it quieter looking, more simple, yeah?
that's why
Yeah.
it was very quiet compared to Egypt, which was so loud. Ridiculous. But it was wow, Oman is a different place. We all loved it. We were Oman, I could live here.
Oh, yeah.
But it was yeah, we're like a village. Even though we were in Muscat, it was and I wonder if part of that landscape too, that quietness that you mentioned, then having that silent time that they can just retreat in a way to the
Could be.
mountains, that they kind of bring that into the cities too. There was a lot of peace.
Omanis are very private people. So their homes all have walls, and nobody goes past a gate into a home unless they're invited. So it's very private, but also secure in that sense, and people actually respect that cultural norm. You wouldn't have loud parties, or there are loudspeakers on the mosque, but otherwise it's not really a loud culture. Yeah.
Thank you for your great presentation. And how Muslim think about wadi? Maybe is there any specific meaning or symbolic things?
I don't know if I can answer that, because I'm not sure that we worked for Al Amana Center, which is an interfaith organization that brought together Christians and Muslims and other faiths to talk about religion. I'm not sure that we talked much about the wadi, though. I can tell you that of the women that I hiked with who were Muslim, one of them, her father was a geologist. And so she would talk about the different rock structures and the different ways to conserve the resources in the wadi. But of course, that's more of an educated angle. I don't know how much religion would play in the landscape. That's a good question. I know that There would be a few signs, especially if there were springs by the mouth of the wadi, asking people to protect and conserve and respect the space because it was water for that village. And as with most, at least in Oman and Bangladesh, as with most Muslim cultures, the name of God was called on a lot. And so often, here we'll see graffiti on a wall somewhere. In the wadis, often at the entrance to the wadi, it would say, Bismillah or Allah Akbar or something that they would graffiti, and that would be it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was it like for your kids when they're, did they go to schools or homeschool or?
Yeah, they were in the American International School, which is like, it's like prep school for embassy kids. But in Oman, the American International School was started with the help of the doctors that worked for the medical mission, which preceded the interfaith work we did with Al-Amana Center. And so when they set up the school, they said, not everyone here will be able to pay your fees. Could we also set up an endowment? And so that was great. That meant that the school they go to, even though it's an American government prep school, there's a variety of families there because they have an endowment for people that can't afford the full price. That was really great. That's the reason we could be there. It was really good. And so they went to school with kids from all over the world. Omanis, most of the Omani families at their school were Omanis that had intermarried. So an Omani man had married someone from somewhere else or the other way around. But it was a very good, diverse place with people from all religions and all countries. It was a good experience. They had grown up in Bangladesh. Our daughters were born in Bangladesh. They went to a small Christian school there that was also very international based. So it was, I think they found it to be a normal place for them. They were used to the international community. We lived here for 1 year between Bangladesh and Oman, and they did not like that. No. And my daughter, who's in 11th grade, is still having a hard time with culture shock because she looks like she's from West Michigan, but she's not from here, and she just doesn't feel like she fits in. And she's also a teenager, so it's a hard time, but I think they enjoyed their time there. They weren't as excited about sweating as my husband and I were, but we got them out in the cooler months, yeah. Yeah.
Questions, Melissa? All right, well, thank you so much. Let's thank Melissa one more time.
Thanks for letting me share. It was fun.
Thank you for sharing, and thank you for all for coming. There's still a lot of food left over there. Help yourself.